Hey there everyone, it's Scott once again, and let me adjust this right here. Okay, that's much better. Anyways, it's Scott, and welcome to another video, and it's actually going to be a movie review. And I apologize for not doing these for quite a while. I've been meaning to, but I just haven't gotten around to it. I've been doing more live streams. And speaking of that, it might be a good while before I do any more live streams, mainly because my computer decided to crash and take a shit on itself. Especially since it's an older model, and I don't think I'll ever get used or refurbished computers again. There's a reason why they're that cheap, so yeah. If I'm going to get a computer, I'm going to try to at least get a brand new one, or at least that one that's open box, but still technically brand new, and it'd be a little cheaper. But anyways, but back on the subject of this movie here, the film I'm going to be doing a review for came out 20 years ago. It's hard to believe it's been that long. And that's of the 2000 film Supernova. And the film itself, I wouldn't say is bad. It has some decent characters. It's got some nice visuals. I think my only gripes with the film is that there's certain awkward moments, and I feel like the story's kind of clunky in itself, and some little awkward edits here and there. It does have an interesting little production history, because there was originally two different directors, and actually, well, I guess you can technically say there was a third director, but he really didn't do much. He just kind of digitally manipulated one scene, and that's pretty much it. And then eventually, because of how it, tested with MGM back in the day, they did a poor job advertising this film. In fact, the trailer they used did the film no favors in it. And to be honest, the trailer, I would have to say, is pretty awful. But I was kind of curious about it because you have some good actors in there. But strangely enough, the director is credited as Thomas Lee, and that's actually a pseudonym name. But I'll get to that at some point, because apparently the directors didn't really want to associate themselves. Well, maybe one of them did, but apparently it's kind of a rough production history. But I feel like I should save that for like a retrospective of this film someday down the road. But anyways, the screenplay was done by David Campbell Wilson, and then apparently the story was done by William Malone and Daniel Chuba. They were trying to make a Dead Space type of film, and it ended up kind of being more lighter in tone to some degree. And the producers are Ash R. Shadad and Daniel Chuba, Jamie Dixon, and the executive producer was actually Ralph S. Singleton. I think he's actually interviewed on this Blu-ray. There's the Blu-ray itself is pretty decent in picture quality. The sound quality is of course pretty good because it's DTS 5.1 audio. So yeah, I think most of the extras on here are pretty much the same from the DVD, which I do have, by the way. Except that there was two new interviews with actors Diamond Phillips and Robert Forster, who's sadly no longer with us. He died back in, I think, July of 2019. And of course, the actors themselves, like I said before, you have James Spader, who's been in a lot of films, like Tough Turf, Wolf, voicing Ultron and Avengers. So yeah, you have that. And you also have Angela Bassett, who's been in a lot of other films. And of course, Robert Forster, who is no longer with us. You have Diamond Phillips, who's been in heaps of roles, like Young Guns 2, Bats, another film, and he was on the TV show Lawnmower. He's been in lots of other projects, so yeah, well-known actor. Then you have Peter Facinelli, who I remember him most from Can't Hardly Wait. He was in some film with Kevin Spacey, The Big Kahuna, and I think the most popular thing he did was Twilight, but I have yet to see that, so yeah. And then you have Tunney, who was another sort of a well-known actress. Like she did The Craft. She did that show with Simon Baker called The Mentalist. She had some small... Oh yeah, she was also in End of Days, which I did a review for recently. Decent actress. And then you have Wilson Cruz. He was on that show, My So-Called Life, I believe. But the most show that I saw him on a lot was actually Party of Five, believe it or not. And, of course, you had the music done by David Williams, and then you have this visual effects done by James Cameron's company, Digital Domain, who did some nice, good visuals. And they even did visual effects for Star Trek Nemesis, actually. So, but anyways, getting to the plot and premise, basically, it's like way in the future. The characters are... You have Robert Forster, who is the captain. James Spader plays this Nick Van Sant character, who is a former hazing addict, who's basically kind of rehabilitating himself, trying to, get his life together. And he's like the co-captain as well. And you have some the other rest of the cast are mainly, or except for Facinelli, they're mainly kind of, I guess you could say, nurses. Medical personnel, pretty much. They're basically on board. They basically are on this ship called the Nightingale, which is an emergency medical rescue vessel that goes around and saving people, or trying to that's what they are. They're basically a medical vessel doing rescues and stuff like that. And apparently they get this distress call from like an abandoned mine, and they actually haven't jumped in several tours. They end up taking the call. Unfortunately, the captain, Robert Forster, who sadly, like I said before, is no longer with us. Apparently his pod, whenever they were when they have the ability to like jump through time, dimension jump pretty much, and it's a pretty stunning visual effect. The visuals are really stunning in this film, but I'll get to the pros and cons later. So he ends up dying because his skin, his pod malfunction, his skin gets fused with the polyglass, and he ends up having, and Kayla, which is Angela Bassett's character, ends up having to, kill him, just to end his suffering. And there's like a kind of a, back and forth sort of buildup of maybe a possible friendship between Spader's character and Bassett's character. And then eventually they come across the person that supposedly made the call sent the distress call, which is Facinelli's character. He claims to be someone of an old boyfriend of Kayla's that was abusive towards her, which is Bassett's character. I apologize for not clarifying. But anyways, things happen. He starts to unravel who he really is, and he also brought aboard this ninth dimensional matter, which could either, which can improve, the physical characteristics of a person, like they can get younger and stronger. But there's like a hidden kind of price to it. Like it starts to slowly turn Carl into this kind of like a monster-looking creature, and he's becoming less human, pretty much. So yeah, there's a price to that, and they eventually have to battle for survival and stuff like that, so to speak. And also, when they jumped, unfortunately, they lost a good deal of fuel, but they have a spare tank, and they have the ability to maybe jump. And apparently, there's going to be like a kind of a kind of an explosion that's going to happen. Well, it's kind of weird how to say, but they'll eventually be able to jump. They have like 11 hours to do so. It's kind of hard to say. I don't want to spoil too much. But anyways, overall, the film's not that bad. It's got some nice little characters. I think Spader, performance-wise, most of the performances are pretty decent. That's not my problem. James Spader does a fine job as Nick Van Sant. He even has some nice little little battles between, little dialogue moments between him and Carl, where he's like, were you born this way, or did this thing make you so stupid? And he's like, I'm coming for you, Carl. And excuse me, I just farted, but that's not important. But anyways, the fact they encountered a strange alien artifact does and has some potential. Like it can either, improve human life or actually either destroy it, and that's kind of interesting. I think my main problem is I felt like the story was a little clunky in areas because apparently it was sort of re-edited, and there was technically 3 different people that really worked on it. Walter Hill originally was directing it and supposedly finished it, but MGM didn't like what he was doing, and he eventually walked away from the project. And eventually Jack Sholder, another director, he directed films like The Hidden, Renegades, the second Nightmare on Elm Street film he directed. And apparently he did some different changes, like he made the characters have a little bit of humor, because originally in Hill's version it was completely absent. And he changed the computer voice and did a majority of the changes, and the studio seemed to approve of it. But apparently they changed heads. They still didn't like what they saw. So they brought in Francis Ford Coppola to do this little manipulation digital technique, where apparently there's a scene where we think it's supposed to be Spader's character and Angela Bassett's character, but it was technically Peter Falinacci's character Carl and Robin Tunney's character Danica. They're in this little zero-gravity sex scene. They try to make it look like it was Spader and Bassett, which was not the case. Though they darkened Tunney's skin tone to make it look like it was Bassett. So that's really what Coppola did. But anyway, like I said, there was some like, for example, they were supposed to be close, but when they're, the spoilers, like when they're the last two survivors, they kind of act a little awkward and stuff like that, so that makes you feel like, other than maybe some nice little positive moments, because apparently when Spader visits Bassett and they share like a pear brandy of some kind, which I thought was, a nice little scene, but it just looked awkward. They felt like they were awkward being naked, because apparently when you're in those pods, you're supposed to be unclothed, because apparently the dimension jump can mess can really mess you up if you're wearing something, and that's how it is. And apparently the phone's ringing, so what's going on with that? Sorry, wasn't expecting that. There you go. I'm just gonna let it ring. Fuck that. But anyways, the characters is what makes this movie, or at least the acting is decent. Nice visuals for sure. The days when CGI really started to take on. It's got some really nice visual moments. And Digital Domain did a really excellent job on the visual effects. They're probably one of the best things about this film, is that the visuals, and then of course, the ship itself was probably like a practical model. So the merging of the CGI and all the practical stuff was done very well. Like, you also saw how, slowly how Carl was starting to transform, pretty much. So yeah, I didn't have a problem with it. I thought it was a decent film. Just that the reason why the trailer was so bad is it made it look like it was going to be a comedy set in space. And they used the wrong songs. They used a song by Sugar Ray. And then the song, a very classic 70s called Mama Told Me something. I forget what the name of the band was, but Mama told me. I can't remember. I can't sing. But anyways, it's not a bad film if you give it a chance. It's just unfortunately the trailer really ruined it. And MGM didn't seem to have much faith in the film. So it's really not a bad film. It's got some nice little moments. It's got some interesting little tidbits, but it just seems like the story itself is a little clunky and some awkward character moments here and there. And they're not bad characters, but I feel like it didn't really I think another flaw to it is that it didn't really spend a whole lot of time developing as much as they could have. The performances, like I said before, the performances are fine. Visuals are good. James Spader is probably the best actor of the bunch. Robert Forster is not too bad, but he gets rather killed off. I think that's another flaw in itself. He gets rather killed off before any, humongous character development happens with him. So I think the flaws with this film is story's a little clunky in areas, lack of character development in certain characters, and I feel like I'm missing something. And awkward editing here and there. But other than that, it's not a bad film. I think it's a time waster for me. So it's not that bad. And the trailer, it's far from what that movie was advertised to be. It screwed with the film, and yeah. But anyways, I think that's going to do it for me. So feel free to give this movie a chance and see if you like it and whatnot. I think it's for free if you can look it up. If not, you can still buy it. Because I think, from what I understood, this is the R cut, and when it was theatrical released, it was PG-13. So that's just a little tidbit of information. But anyways, feel free to give this video a thumbs up, a like, and whatnot. And by the way, I did get over 300 subs. I'm at 301, but I don't want to celebrate just yet, because sometimes you might lose a few subs, and that's happened within the past 2 weeks. So I'm not gonna, celebrate just yet. I'm not gonna do that quite yet. I want to make sure I get a little bit over 300, and then I'll call it good. So yeah. But anyways, thank you for watching this video, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.